Hey, what is going on, guys? My name is Gamertag and I'm back for your daily Fortnite video. In today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you guys the best settings for controller Fortnite. So whether you're playing on Xbox One, PS4, or if you're using the controller on PC, this video will benefit you. Sharing with you guys the settings I use this way in case you want to replicate them, as well as sharing with you guys how to optimize your own personal settings if you want to use your own. With that being said, if you guys are going to enjoy the video, a like would be very much appreciated. On the contrary, if you genuinely dislike today's video, feel free to leave a dislike. I'd also appreciate a comment letting me know what I can improve on for future videos to make them more enjoyable for you. And if you're new around here and would like to see more daily Fortnite content like this in the future, then feel free to subscribe and turn on those post notifications. With that out of the way, let's hop right into today's video. So again, as I mentioned, I'm going to be sharing with you guys the best settings for controller on Fortnite. I'm going to be discussing sensitivity, keybinds, some other general settings I use, as well as dead zone settings. So I'm going to be sharing with you guys the exact settings I use. This way, in case you want to replicate them, you can do so by all means. However, if you want to use your own settings that you're more comfortable with, I'll be sharing with you guys how to also optimize your settings. And that is pretty simple if you ask me. With that out of the way, let's hop right into it. Now, I make these videos weekly on my channel. Usually every Friday or Saturday, I'll upload a new setting video. And I'll share with you guys the changes I've made on my settings and go over the changes and explain them. And if you're new around here, I'll explain why I use these settings. So now you guys should have a better general understanding of these videos. Anyways, the first setting for sensitivity is going to be X and Y. This is one that I changed the most and I feel like should usually be fluctuated the most compared to any other setting in Fortnite. Now, X and Y pretty much pertains to your free aim. So when you're looking around whilst running and not aiming down with a weapon, this is what will basically be affected. And then secondly, what will be impacted is hip firing, which is usually only done with pumps and tactical shotguns. So basically, as you know, some of you guys probably don't aim down while you're using a shotgun at all times. It's about 50-50. Half the time you'll aim down while using a shotgun and half the time you won't. So again, the only thing X and Y sensitivity will impact is your free aim as well as hip firing with shotguns. So of course, we don't want to have it too high at a point where it's actually very difficult to aim with our shotguns and our accuracy takes a huge decline. So I typically like to keep mine in the 0.6 range all the way up to like a 0.8 at most. And recently I've been changing this just about every week. Now, for whatever reason, whenever I stop playing Fortnite for maybe a day or two, I'll come back and this setting seems like it's very high and I usually end up lowering it. So last week was actually at a pretty low setting. I believe it was around 0.622 or something along those lines, which is about the lowest I've ever had it at. So this week I've been playing a lot more often than last week, of course, with the release of Season 9. So I have actually increased it a little bit. It is now at a 0.68, so we're moving up to the 0.7 range, which is what I prefer to have it at. I personally think my perfect setting that I've ever had it at was around a 0.725. However, a jump from 0.622 to 0.75 is quite significant. So that's why we're raising it at small increments. So again, X and Y sensitivity is at a 0.68. Now moving on to our controller targeting sensitivity. This is one I don't like to mess with at all. In fact, it's been the same since my first sensitivity or setting video rather. And my targeting sensitivity is at a 0.330. The reason I have it lower than what most people have it at is because I like to have better accuracy. Of course, if it's higher, yeah, you might be able to turn a lot faster. However, I don't see the need in having it that high whatsoever. It's just not necessary, and it usually creates people to have a lot lower accuracy than if they were to have it at a lower setting. Again, 0.330 has done me a lot of justice, and it's definitely increased my accuracy quite a bit. And to be quite honest, if I were to ever make a change to this setting, I'd more than likely lower it opposed to increasing it. So again, my controller targeting sensitivity is at a 0.330. Now moving on to my controller scope sensitivity. This is also one I don't really like to mess with. Again, X and Y sensitivity, yeah, I'll usually mess with this probably every other day, whereas these two settings are ones that I have found the best for me and I don't like to mess with them. So again, my scope sensitivity is at a 0.567. Now this one I think is at a pretty average rate. If anything, is probably a little lower than average, but it's definitely not too high by any means. We used to have like a 0.7 or a 0.8, which I'm sure a lot of you guys use. The reason I've lowered it is because again, I'm focused on having better accuracy opposed to being able to look around fast. And of course, we all don't use scoped items that much, maybe like a sniper or a scoped AR, but again, not a lot of weapons have scopes on them, so this is not something you'll usually have an impact on unless of course you use snipers very often. So I definitely think a lot of you guys should try out the setting. Again, a 0.567 sensitivity for the scope weapons. If If anything, you'll probably see an increase in accuracy with these weapons. Now moving on to the controller building sensitivity. This is one that a lot of you guys are probably wondering about, and I have mine at a 0.1975. Now I had it at a 0.1950 last week, so I pretty much moved it up like 0.025, which is a very little bit, but I'm trying to work my way up all the way to the max, which is a straight up 2.000. Now I'm sure a lot of you guys, if you're at a low setting, wants to pretty much move it all the way up, and this is not what we should be doing, especially now with this sensitivity setting, because this setting alone is very sensitive. So if you move it a little bit, it'll actually make a huge difference, and you'll more than likely be building out of control, otherwise known as panic building. Now if you want to raise yours up to a very high setting like mine to maybe have faster builds, the one thing I can recommend doing is moving it in small increments once you are comfortable with what you're on. For instance, if you have it at a 1.40 right now, I'd recommend moving it at half a decimal place. So once you're comfortable with 1.40, we're then going to move it up to 1.450. Once you're very comfortable with that, after about maybe 8 games or so, then move it up to a 1.5, then a 1.550, then a 1.6, so on and so forth, and then work your way all the way up. Now the reason I haven't moved mine up in the past few weeks that much is because 1.950 is really high, to be honest, and I'm very comfortable with it and don't really feel like I need to move it up whatsoever. With my past settings like a 1.650 where I moved it up, yeah, there are pretty fast sensitivity settings for building. However, I was very comfortable with them to the point that I felt like I can do it a lot faster. Whereas again, 1.950, I'm very satisfied with the speed of this building sensitivity. Now moving on to the controller editing sensitivity, this is one that in the past couple of videos has been kind of controversial, at least in my commentary. Basically, I've mentioned that sometimes you should have it at a 2.000, and then in one of my other videos I mentioned you should have it at like a 1.650. However, in today's video I'll stand by my previous statement of keeping it at a 2.000, which is the max editing sensitivity. Reason being is because you're more than likely going to make editing errors regardless of what the sensitivity is at. So with this sensitivity setting alone, we're just trying to figure out what makes it a lot easier and faster to make our edits. So basically what I've done is moved it all the way up to a 2.000. The best part about this is it allows us to make edits a lot quicker and in a lot lower range of motion. So instead of having it at like a straight up 1.000 where you have to take a lot longer and a lot bigger range of motion to make a simple edit, now it's simply about twice the speed and about half the amount of motion you would typically be making. So that is why I recommend everyone have it at the max setting. Now the way to optimize your sensitivity settings, in case none of these in my videos really suit your needs or you're not comfortable with them, the first thing you want to do is at least make the settings to where you're comfortable with them, and then after doing that you basically want to raise and decrease it in really small increments until you found the perfect spot. So for X and Y, let's say you have it at a 0.7. In the next game, I'd recommend you decrease it to a 0.65, and if that has actually made your accuracy worse or it's less comfortable for you, then raise it back to a 0.7 and then raise it to a 0.75. So you guys can see we're decreasing it, and if that's not helping, then we're increasing it. And if that helps, then maybe try increasing it a little more, and then basically keep doing this, decreasing and increasing until you find your perfect comfortability zone, and then this is essentially how you optimize your sensitivity settings. So again, find what setting is comfortable for you, and then we're going to increase and decrease it until we've actually in fact balanced it out, until we've found our perfect sensitivity setting for each setting. Now moving on to some of the other various and miscellaneous settings I'd recommend you guys should have on. I think that everyone should have sprint by default on, and I usually explain this in the keybinds, so I will do that. So again, sprint by default should be on, and again, I'll explain that here in a few minutes. As well as tap to search and interact. This just makes it a lot easier. So instead of holding X or square to open a chest or ammo box, you simply just press the button once, or tap it rather, and then it'll open. So again, this just makes it a lot easier on you. The next, I think everyone should have aim assist on, of course. If you don't, then please check that out. Of course, we want Builder Pro build immediately on, as well as turbo building. So those are the main ones that I can think of as of right now. Now moving on to another setting that I'd recommend you guys change, which might come to a shock to you guys. This is actually the brightness setting. So the default value for brightness is set to a 0.50, which is pretty much what everyone uses. However, I've raised mine to a 0.80. What this has done is allows me to actually spot out players that are in shadows or just generally dark areas. A lot of pro players used to use this for other various games such as like Call of Duty and such, and not a lot of people use it for Fortnite, and I'm not too sure as of why. So again, raising your brightness to a 0.8 or even just like a 0.6 or 0.7 is going to allow you guys to actually spot out players that are in dark areas easier than what you originally would have been able to do. So that is basically why I've actually raised this. It just makes it a lot easier on me. Next, we're going to move on to my keybinds. Now my keybinds are actually the same as last week, and I mentioned in last week's video I was actually going to change a couple of my keybinds, and they're going to be very drastic changes. But due to the severity of how drastic they really are, I'm going to give it a couple weeks, so maybe next week you'll probably more than likely see the change that I have made, as I'm trying to get comfortable and just used to it in general. And trust me, this change is very beneficial and a lot of you guys will love it, so again, definitely stay tuned for next week's video. Anyways, my keybinds are actually pretty different and unique than a lot of people's. So just to give you guys exactly what they are, my Y button, which is also triangle for PS4, is set to edit. And then my L3, which is clicking in the left analog stick, is actually set to toggle pickaxe. So that's really the only two keybind settings I actually have, but again, these are very unique and not a lot of people use these. Now the reason I have Y or triangle set to edit is because I wanted an instant edit button. It allows you to make a lot quicker edits. You don't have to hold B or circle every time you make an edit. So I figured Y would be pretty decent, as my fingers is usually resting right about there. And of course that's usually the default button for toggling your pickaxe. So I now needed to find an alternative for that. I figured I could put it on L3, which is the left analog stick, because my thumb is already there. Now of course that's the sprint button, which is why we have sprint by default on. And most pro players or any good Fortnite player uses sprint by default, because there's never a time you shouldn't be sprinting, unless of course you're crouching, but sprint by default does not activate sprinting when you are crouching. So you guys can see this all makes like a perfect triangle. Y set to edit, L3 set to toggle pickaxe, and then we have sprint by default on. So I really recommend you guys try these keybinds. I'm pretty sure I've never really seen anyone else use these. However, for me, they've done very well for me. Now lastly, we're going to move on to the dead zones, and this is probably not what a lot of people are interested in, just because this setting alone is a big gray area. So I have my left one set to 0.20 and my right set to 0.27. I believe the default value for both is 0.20. However, when dead zones first came out, I messed with them a little bit and just found that 0.27 was pretty good for my right analog stick. Now I'm not really going to give an explanation as of what this does, because most changes are really minor and you won't really see an impact on it. So keeping it at around what I have, or again just the default value, will pretty much suit your guys' needs. So if you have your set to a really high setting or a really low setting, please set them back to the default, and you'll definitely see that's going to be a lot easier in general. So this setting I don't recommend anyone really mess with, and if you do, mess with it in very small increments. So that is pretty much it for today's video. Hopefully you guys did enjoy it and or found it helpful. If you did, a like would be very much appreciated. On the contrary, if you genuinely disliked today's video, feel free to leave a dislike. I'd also appreciate a comment letting me know what I can improve on for future videos to make them more enjoyable for you. And if you're new around here and would like to see more daily Fortnite content like this in the future, then feel free to subscribe and turn on those post notifications. With that out of the way, my name is Gamertag. Thank you all for watching today's video, and I'll see you tomorrow. Adios.